Monday, May 19th. Big stories. Coinbase. Was it ransom? Was it extortion? Tell you what, it's got a lot of security issues that we're going to talk about today. We're also talking about FBI's warnings about people being impersonated, government officials specifically, but that doesn't mean it can't be you or your CEO that needs you to wire them money.
This is the DTF Cyber Podcast. I'm Damian. That's a D. There's Troy.
This is Troy.
That's a T.
And I put the F in DTF. Fern. Let's go. Thanks for joining. Today, interesting stories. The most prevalent one was all over LinkedIn last week. There's a lot of people jumping in with opinions about the Coinbase, I'll say in quotations, ransom.
I like to say, would you say incident? I don't like to use the B word. I don't know, Troy, if you like to use the B word. I don't like to use.
No, I think breach is a bit much, but definitely is it ransom or extortion question? I think they're pretty synonymous, right? It's trying to extort them for a ransom for giving their information back and not releasing it to the public. I love the response here. I'm a big fan.
We should do let's do an overview of what happened because people may not have heard of it.
So I read through a few different things, right? So we'll just assume that I'm the common person. The common person on LinkedIn doesn't necessarily have hands on a keyboard for security related things all day. Definitely not reading a bunch of articles all day, right? But from what I understand, tell me if I'm right. So I'm gonna maybe we should call this section the burning fern, and I need you guys to be like water and contain me. Okay. So here's what I believe I understand as a layperson. Some bad actors found people overseas in customer support and offered them money. Said, hey, what happens if we give you a little bit of extra dough? What kind of information can you give us? And the plan was to use that information to reach out to actual Coinbase users, validate the information that they know is good, and trick these people to send them money. That was a scheme. That's what happened. Then they tried to extort Coinbase for $20 million. And Coinbase said, all right, guys, you know what? No. What we're going to do is we're going to pay people $20 million to find out who the hell you guys are, or women. It might be, maybe it's both. Maybe it's a dog. I don't know. And we're going to come after you. So very similar to in certain countries where they offer a bounty on someone's head, and then all of a sudden hackers want money, the bad actors want money, so they rat out their friends, and all of a sudden, those guys get extradited. So that's kind of what I would say is a broad overview. A lot of people are saying there was a ransom. I disagree. I think it was a failed attempt at extortion. But everyone says the response is great. So yeah, I think that's, did I burn more than I should have?
Yeah, I think you got it. But my question is, what's the difference between extortion and a ransom? I think the act of extorting someone for money is in fact a ransom. So they're pretty much the same thing, right? What's the difference in your mind?
For me, I don't think they actually encrypted the data, right? So traditional ransomware would be encrypt the data and say, I'm only going to give it back to you if you pay the ransom. So they're holding the data ransom. In this case, I do think it's more of an extortion because I think the data was out there, right?
Just to play devil's advocate, I think ransomware is like a software malware that is a particular technique. But if you kidnap someone and you hold them hostage and you extort their family for a ransom, that's where ransomware came from. The meaning of the word, it's a malware that they extort you for money. So it's a ransom.
Yeah, but
ransomware. So in this case, it is a ransom, but it's just not ransomware that was used to block anything.
Definitely not ransomware because there was no malicious software.
Yeah.
Or insiders. But are they holding the data ransom? Is this data that Coinbase does not have access to anymore? And I don't think so, right? I think it is their data. There's a copy out there, and
it was
pay us money and we'll delete it.
Yeah. So if we're going to convert this to regular people terms, right? Other stories in the news, Diddy Diddy had all these parties, right?
Oh, you're going to get me in trouble.
Okay. So we won't say anything about that. But what we will say is there are alleged stories, right? And apparently, allegedly, things happen there where there's proof of things happening, right? But nothing was ever released. So maybe what's a good way to describe this? If we can't talk about Diddy, we can talk about, this actually happens a lot. It's actually another scam, and we haven't really covered it. Sextortion happens a lot to teenagers, right? Where the number of teenagers committing suicide because of bad actors getting them to send certain pictures and then saying, hey, we're going to show your friends and family. We know who they are. Give us money. Very similar, right? It wasn't like they said, hey, we have your bank account. We have your keys to your car. We have your entire life wrapped up. Give us money and you'll get it all back. It's more so, hey, we have embarrassing stuff of you. If you don't pay us, we're going to release it. And to me, Coinbase feels more so like, hey, we have embarrassing information of we got information from people that are your employees and we were able to essentially scam your clients.
Well, I don't know if they didn't say they got it from inside employees. From what I understand, actually, Coinbase may have already caught that these employees may have been exfiltrating data earlier.
Oh, okay. So that would be
Things they shouldn't. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so in my mind, when I think of ransom, I think of, hey, we just took the engine out of your car. You either pay us the money and we'll put the engine back and you can go on your way, but you're never going to drive your car. And when in business terms, if they encrypt your entire storage array, you can't get access to database, you can't make any sales. That is holding your business ransom. Coinbase was not in that situation. So from my optics, they weren't being held for ransom, or their data wasn't being held ransom. It was more so, hey, we have some information. We're going to do bad things with it. Pay us or otherwise. So to me, it seems like two different things because business is still operating. No one knew that there was any sort of issue until they released their 8K and then publicly announced what was happening. Whereas if you think of your favorite retail chain that is held for ransom, you can't buy what you want. Their entire systems are down. Business is interrupted. So to me, doesn't feel like ransom. But then again, maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, no, I think to Damian, to your point, when you said, I think is a really good delineation. If they're holding something that you're going to get back that maybe is a ransom, like, if you're ransoming a kidnapped person, you pay a ransom to get them back, right? So I think in this case, you're exactly right. It is extortion because the company still had that data and access to that data. They didn't lose access to the data. So they didn't lose anything that they were trying to get back. They were just trying to stop the attackers from releasing it to the public. And obviously they turned the script here. And I think the reason this is such a big story is we really like how the CEO of Coinbase came out very transparent. Again, this is how you handle these situations. You come out very quickly. You're very transparent. And I love the fact that they've reimbursed the victims. If there were any victims of social engineering, they've gone and reimbursed them directly. And then there's a place on their website. If you were a victim, you were already notified. So that was great. And then, flipping the script and saying, we're not going to pay this $20 million ransom, but we're going to put this $20 million up as a reward for information leading to your arrest. I think that's a great move.
That's like, it reminds me of like, if you have kids, it's like everyone's having fun until somebody gets hurt. Like everyone's just running around laughing. And like the kids like are spraying water all over the concrete. And then all of a sudden one of them slips and busts their head. And you're like, hey, like it was fun until you got caught or until you slipped. And this kind of feels like that, where they're out there doing these things, getting this information, trying to socially engineer people, probably getting some form of payment. And then when they say, hey, we want more, it's like, no. We're just going to come after you instead. And it's like, oh, man. Because it reminds you of like a Star Wars, right? You guys, where they have the bounties like the Mandalorians, like they get paid to hunt people down, right? And then in the show, recently, I forget who the character was, Mando was going after someone and say, hey, we'll pay you more if you don't get me. Like, I'll pay you double for you not to arrest me and bring me back in. But these criminals probably don't have 40 million, right? To avoid the people coming after them. So to me, it's interesting.
Well, here's the thing. This is what I would say, right? I don't think, and I don't know if there's any statistics on this. Maybe we can go find it. How many organizations actually pay an extortion or a ransomware fee? Obviously, it does happen. Otherwise, these criminals would not go and try to get millions of dollars in a ransomware, right? It's so if no one ever paid, I don't think they would have any profits in it. But there are some organizations might look at this and say, hey, if it costs me $1 million to get my data unlocked so I can keep doing business, I'm going to pay that. But the downside to that is now they know you're going to pay. So are you going to make yourself a victim a second and a third time?
Yeah, and Damian, I was having dinner with one of our mutual friends last week. They were talking about Australia solved this problem by passing a law that made it illegal to pay a ransom. Illegal for companies or individuals to pay a ransom. And you know what? There's no more ransomware attacks in Australia because people are forbidden to pay. So, it seems like a very easy fix if you forbid people from paying. And I think the FBI originally came out and said, do not pay the ransom. But then as you mentioned, there are companies who say, I need that critical business data back. They make a business decision to pay that ransom. And again, if we stopped paying these guys, it would stop the attacks. But I just think there's some critical data that people need.
What role do you think the CISO plays in that decision?
So personal experience, and it's probably different in every company, every different industries, depending what you're doing. But I think the CISO is an informer to people like legal, to the CEO, and to the board. Informing how widespread it is, how bad the damage is, how bad the operational outage is going to be. Working closely with the IT team, the CIO. I think that those folks need to inform the decision makers, but it has to come from the top. The CEO of any company needs to be the one that says whether you pay or don't pay. And I think the board sometimes needs to be involved and informed before that decision is made, because it could have very negative effects both ways, whether you pay or if you don't pay. It could have very negative public effects, reputational effects, operational effects. So it's a pretty big deal. I do love the fact that Coinbase came out so quickly and so transparently and so directly. And I think that's what people want. I mean, we have breach fatigue, happens all the time. You see a new breach in the news every day, but very rarely do you get somebody to stand up like this and call these folks out.
It was really fast too. I think this all happened within 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah, I think so. And what's interesting? The video that I saw looked like it was shot on a cell phone. Like, it wasn't anything highly produced. It wasn't anything done in a studio. It looked like it might have been an iPhone 14. Definitely wasn't as clear as some of the newer cameras out there. But I thought that was interesting that instead of them putting an entire marketing team behind it or a PR team, it was like, hey, this guy just pulled out a cell phone and he's talking to the people from, you couldn't even tell where he was at, but it was like a room, obviously, like with a white wall behind him. So to me, that was even interesting too, from a delivery to the public of, yeah, it's just, we just did this right now. Like it almost felt like the way that it was presented made it feel like, to me, that, hey, we have to hurry up and get something out there. Doesn't matter how we get it. Let's just do it and send it. Okay, grab your phone. Let's just go. Right? It didn't feel like, here's the legalese terms that you have to say. We're trying to avoid being sued down the line. There's all these things that you can't say because we're concerned about our image. It was just, hey, talk to the people, tell them what happened, and then we'll go from there. Which is probably the first time I've seen something like that. Maybe at this.
Sometimes you'll get information saying, "Hey, we had an incident," but they don't give you any details.
No, and if you do get something in writing, it's usually written by a lawyer that really hard to understand for the average person that doesn't read legal contracts all the time. So this felt more like a person-to-person communication. And because most of the people that probably use Coinbase aren't necessarily, we'll say, technologists.
Well, I think it's the same. Lawyers are probably cringing right now. I don't know what their legal counsel, if they approved it or not. But it's a challenging thing to, just go out there and give a lot of information. Mm-hmm. Because if we go backwards, let's just go backwards and say, well, how did this even get started? Was the company at fault? Did they not have the right controls in place? Did they, hire the wrong people? We're starting to talk about insider threat. and every organization has insider threat in different ways, right? But this is an ideal situation of insider threat where somebody who's already inside has access to the systems and took that data, copied it, and moved it outside the organization.
Yeah. Yeah.
Damian, I don't know if you remember the Kaseya ransomware a few years ago. Kaseya is a remote management tool for, managed service providers. And they were very quick. The CEO was very quick to come out and transparently talk about what happened, what they were doing to fix it, and how they're going to prevent it in the future. Very clean, very, very quick and transparent. I think that people really like that, and it helped them get through that with the least amount of, trust being broken. I would like to say, again, the CrowdStrike outage, which was not a cyber attack. This was an outage. But the fact that George Kurtz came out on the news the very next morning, I don't think he had even slept through the night. And he's on CNBC or what MSNBC, whatever it was, and he's telling people what happened and what they were doing to fix it. And, they actually gave some Falcon Flex credits, and they were, making sure their customers were aware of the situation and how they were going to prevent it going forward. I think those things go a long, long way to, solidifying trust in your customer base and really in the industry.
I think it goes back to just like how you approach your clients or people that, purchase your service or products. So here's another interesting thing too is somewhat adjacent is a lot of personal branding you see online. Like some of the CEOs of the largest companies have a larger following than the companies that they represent. I think a big part of that is people care about the person versus the organization. And I think there's more of like a connection when you watch George, for example, talk about what happened and what they're doing to fix it versus if a statement came out from the company's profile, like LinkedIn page, for example, because you can see the person, who they are, what they're saying. And it's a person-to-person, communication. So I think overall it's probably the best route for these to go. Will we see a lot more of that in the future? Potentially. I don't know. But it definitely feels like the way people respond to it is much better than they would if it just came as a email.
I just want to add one more thing because I'm so passionate about this exact subject. And I'll give you an example. I will not name the vendor, but we have a very opposite effect where it's a publicly traded cybersecurity company that had a breach, and they were not as transparent as people wanted them to be. They had to recant a couple of things that they had put out into the news that were not exactly true. The breach was bigger than they let on it to be months later. And so every time there was new information that came out that, conflicted with what they had said before, that trust was lost and eroded. It took them probably 18 to 24 months to recover their share price, their market cap, all the things with their stock because, customers had lost trust. And this is a trust industry. Cybersecurity is all about trust. And that transparency is absolutely critical to, giving trust back to the folks who are going to be using your security products.
So, the question now, though, is like, okay, we got the response, but looking backwards, one of the things I like to do, especially coming from an incident response, SOC, Security Operations Center, looking at this event and saying, well, how did it happen? And what controls could we put in as an organization to prevent the insider threat? And I think today that's not that difficult because there's so many different technologies and methods that you could use to be making sure that your data is not leaving your organization. DLP has been around for a long time, but now we have a lot of more technologies that are out there that could just identify where your data is and where it's going, especially in that cloud world today.
I think this is a tale as old as time, right? Bribing people to do something that you want them to do against their employer, right? We remember the Tesla employee here in Nevada that was arrested for being bribed $1 million to put ransomware on the system. In fact, I don't think they were arrested. I think they cooperated with law enforcement. So my point is, like, there are people out there making so much money in ransomware and crypto scams and things. They have money to burn, and paying somebody $10,000 to $50,000 to $100,000 to get your foot in the door at a place that's going to return you several $1 million in ransom is a good investment. So, I think we need to be looking at the people side of this, no matter what side of the world you're on. I know this happened in outside the U.S., but this could happen right here in our backyard.
But before we get into the offshoring, because I know Fern had a question about, does the location matter? Before you get there, though, there are guardrails. I think in this case, if data is your, what's really important to your company, you better know where all your data is. You better know who's using it, touching it. It's like a bank vault. You should know who is walking into that bank vault and what are they leaving with, right? So, I mean, when I was a teenager, I used to work at the Nike warehouse, and I used to pack shoes and do inventory, ship them out to the stores. But when you walked out, there's a security guard there making sure you're not walking out with any merchandise. And if you're wearing merchandise, you better have a receipt for it. Because, obviously you get an employee discount at the employee store. And so people are wearing the latest merchandise. But there's that check, right? You're checking who's going into the building. You're checking who's coming out and what are they carrying when they come out. So I think the same concept has to apply when you're dealing with data. Who is accessing that data? When are they accessing it? And then if they're taking it with them or moving it off of a company-controlled device, that needs to be noted as well, or observed at least.
Yeah, I agree. And then, the one thing that I found very fascinating was that they didn't have access to any of the financial data, no tokens, no master passwords, anything like that. This was just customer service data, names, date of births, addresses, etc. All that stuff can be put together to create a social engineering attack by these attackers. And so, these customer service representatives needed access to, customers' information to help them. And so that was, one way that they were able to get this data out. But, how do you limit, access to data that you need to do your job? That's a good question.
So,
well, you can access that data, right? But as soon as you try to take it off a controlled device, that should already be some sort of red flag, right? Whether you're copying it to a USB. Let's walk through this. You're a customer support person. You have access to all this data. Great. Now, if you download it locally to your, hopefully a work machine, right?
Get a copy.
So you got a copy on your work machine. Then how do you get it off your work machine? USB? Well, we got USB controls. You can lock it down or you can put USB on DLP. Upload to a private cloud repository.
Browser type of.
Sure, like Google Drive, even your own personal AWS S3 bucket. But we have visibility into that too, because you can see data going into repositories that don't belong to the organization.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Right? Screen scrapers. You got cell phones taking a picture of the screen. It's hard to detect that as well.
That one's a tougher one.
Yeah. So this is like a 20-year-old story, by the way. Okay, I'm gonna tell you guys a 20-year-old story. I used to do telemarketing. I used to work at MCI, and I was the 1999 long distance dialer. Right, going at 4 o'clock after high school. Going at 4 o'clock, smile and dial, call 200-300 people, and get them to convert their phone plans to MCI long distance for whatever. Right. In the back of the MCI building, which is off of Dobson and Williamsfield, which is now a Safelight building. If you go to the back, off to the right, they had what was called the relay team. Relay team is for people that are deaf. So there's a special group of people that pick up the phone that essentially type out the message for them to communicate with someone else to be able to receive. And one of the controls that they had in place was there are no personal cell phones beyond this door. Because what they were doing is the people that would call in for the relay service would typically have their credit card information, their banking information, any other information that they had to make some sort of online payment. Because this was like 20 years ago, right? This was before like you could just hop on a computer easily and pay for stuff. So the people that worked there on the relay team would tell us these stories about how you could never get a hold of them during their business hours because they didn't have a cell phone. And the reason for that was because MCI at the time knew if people have access to someone's debit card, credit card, it becomes a risk to their business. Because if someone scams a person by taking their information, we're going to be held accountable for that, right? So no cell phones. So now if you take that story and fast forward 20 years, how would you do that in a customer service environment where you lock down the USB ports? Do you just take away the ability for people to have their cell phones? Does that become an issue for people? Because realistically, everyone has access to systems that have sensitive information, and everyone has a cell phone. The ease of just pulling out your cell phone and snapping a picture and sending that through a text, through Signal, WhatsApp.
Yeah, but I think you're limited to what that screen can display. So how many pictures are you going to take in order to get, millions of records? I don't know how many records were in this case, but even thousands, it's hard, right? To take pictures and then scrape that. That's a lot more work than just downloading it and then copying that data off digitally.
Yeah. So it would be a lot of work for someone, but the ease of use is there, right? And I think it's very low barrier of entry, regardless of where you live, right? So just maybe some food for thought. If you guys have anything to add to that, I don't know what I would say, but
yeah, I think we talked about it in a previous episode about data loss prevention tools and insider threat. And I think there's a lot of technology out there that can help you detect anomalous activity by employees and prevent data loss. Exactly. And so I think that we have the means to do it. I'm glad to see Coinbase making changes. They even said they're moving some of their customer support people into different regions. So we'll talk about that in a minute with Fern. But I just think that this holistic approach of protecting data and remembering that sometimes the biggest threat is inside. Companies and CISOs listening to this need to think about that. What's the threat if my guys look at the crown jewels and take that data out? How am I going to know if they did that? Another great example of insider threat is like when somebody leaves and goes to a new company, they take all their customer information with them. They download their Salesforce data. They download, the sales pitch deck from this company. Now they're going to a competitor. So these kind of things are very important that you're keeping an eye on what's leaving your four walls, as Damian said.
What's interesting too from the sales world? Most people that are in sales have clearly a cell phone. And usually if they're working with people, they keep that phone number in their cell phone, right? So it doesn't matter where you go. You've always got that person's contact information in your cell phone. So yeah, major DLP risk there. But one interesting thing that I just thought about, while we're talking about this is if you're looking at preventing these things from happening, right, you might be looking for certain products. But we don't name products here unless they sponsor the show. So anyone out there, hint, if you are a vendor that wants to get a little 30-second pop-up, maybe right here behind me, right, on the green screen, that's going to say the company name.
Where our logo is?
Yeah, right where the logo is, right here.
Just swap it out.
If you want your brand there, because you can support customers progressing through their journey, let us know. What's the email for us, Damian?
DTF@cyberpodcast.net.
That's where you go, because right now this is for charity. we're not making any for this, but I guess switching gears back to what are the best ways, or not necessarily the best ways, but the fact that the people that were involved on the insider threat were overseas. And the first thing that comes to mind for me is there are a lot of businesses that offshore, nearshore for competitive costs, right? It's much cheaper, or maybe cheaper is not. It's not that the quality is worse. It's much more cost effective to pay people in different countries.
Well, the cost of living is a lot lower in some of these countries. But you're right, the talent is not any less.
Yeah, so I want to make sure it doesn't seem like we're saying that we're getting lower quality for a lower price. No. We're getting just as good quality, but in some of these areas, a carton of eggs isn't $20. Here, if you go to Sprouts or some of these other places, you walk out $100 every single grocery trip, and you look in your bag and you got a loaf of bread and some turkey. So like you said, cost of living is much lower. And my thought is, like, there's a reason why people go to these other countries, right, to find talent. But is that becoming a risk? And should that be something people consider?
Do we know specifically what country this happened in? I don't know if I saw it anywhere.
They said.
Okay. But they did say it was international.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, so there's a few things, right? I built out an international team. The number one reason was to cover 24/7 and not have to have people in the United States work 24/7, 7 days a week. So follow the sun model was the number one reason. The number two reason was, it's a little bit cheaper to have resources in these countries with lower cost of living. And there was a lot of available talent, or a lot of younger talent that was coming up that we could train into the thought process that we already had. So is that a risk? I mean, I think that exists anywhere, right? I don't know if there's any difference from somebody being overseas versus being in the United States, but obviously the money goes a lot further. So if we're paying them less, their cost of living is less, then, you think about $100,000. I don't know. That's a lot of money. Here in the United States, that is a hell of a lot of money in somewhere that's like India or the Philippines.
Yeah, you can live like a king, right? So it's less of, well, they're overseas, so it's going to cost us less to do the same amount of damage. I don't think that's not what I'm getting at. I think what I'm getting at is Troy said 50,000, 100,000 earlier, and you just said 100,000. So we're just going to stick with 100,000.
Well, remember the first episode that we did was on corporate espionage, and that person was being paid what, 60 grand a year, $5,000 a month.
Yeah, it was less than $6,000 a month.
And they were in the United States.
No, I think there were so many stories. I think they might have been in the UK, but we could. It's basically almost equivalent, right?
Or more expensive in some cases, but yeah.
So it's interesting to think, like, if someone said, "Hey, I'm going to give you $100,000 today to go do this," interesting proposition, right? Now, if that 100,000 in another country can get me like a McMansion, becomes way more appealing, right? So it's almost like the equivalent of $1 million in another country in some of these cases. So if you have a budget and you're trying to stick within budget, where do you get the most output? Probably not from people in the U.S. because the money doesn't go as far. And I think it's the incentive exists.
So what you're saying is it's more cost effective for us to put resources there, but the downside is it's also more cost effective for the bad guys to bribe them.
Exactly. Because of the disparity in cost of living. Not that the people are any different, not that there's any sort of discrimination against the people or their skills or anything. It's just the simple fact of a loaf of bread there costs way less than a loaf of bread here. So the dollar for dollar normalization between the two countries turns into, I can get a lot more over here.
Yeah, your bribe money goes further.
Yeah.
Did you guys see the statistic that cybercrime is now the third largest GDP in the world behind the United States and whomever else is second? So $100,000 is a drop in the bucket to these guys, especially with the return on investment of millions of dollars for that. So, I mean, the money is going to be a problem. Bribery is going to continue to be a problem. You got to make sure you're doing background checks on your employees and that you're holding them accountable and making sure that you're, being safe with the crown jewels, as Damian said. We talked about the balance between overreach of, monitoring tools into employees, as well as, building a culture where people want to come to work. But you have to protect your data and your crown jewels from being siphoned off like this. It could be catastrophic for someone like Coinbase, for their customers to lose that data.
What's interesting is, so this is now officially episode 4, right? And the Coinbase story actually carries a lot of tied parallels to some of the stories that we've covered in the past. And it's almost like they were kind of building up to the Coinbase story. So I don't know about next week. We'll have to see what happens in the news. But it feels like every week we keep adding more context to these situations and how they relate to the latest. So now it's insider threat, DLP, corporate espionage.
AI
is coming for my job.
Yeah, that's good. That's another one, right?
Well, I would, it's common themes. But the one thing I would recommend everybody out there, if you're in cybersecurity, just read these articles, but don't just read them to see what happened, right? Read them to figure out what would you do for your organization to maybe put other controls in place. I think it's important to learn from these incidents, right? There's no shame in any organization admitting that they had an issue or an incident, because I think it helps us as an industry to go back and figure out how do we make our own organizations better.
Yeah, so it's kind of related, but I think both of you guys have a really good experience with this. And it's this fact that being wrong is okay, especially in security, right? Because the faster you fail, the quicker you can prevail. Yeah, I just made that up. But in reality is like, even in the other podcast, when I talk to people, they say, hey, we like to build a culture of inclusivity or inclusion, right? And rewarding failure, because what it allows us to do is understand where the gaps exist and what we can do to fix it to avoid potential disaster down the line. But in security, that's very common, or at least it seems to me that's very common. But outside of security, the idea of being wrong, failing, losing something, having an incident is almost frowned upon.
So, well, there's a pretty big impact, right? You have healthcare organizations that go through a ransomware incident that could cost them tens of millions of dollars in damages, right? So, what do you do? If you go backwards and say, how did this happen? And let's say somebody made a mistake. I don't know. We talked about last week leaving an S3 bucket open.
Yep.
Maybe there was one person that accidentally left it open or ran a script that opened it up and forgot to close it. If you were that person, would you expect to be fired?
I think it depends on the company you work for. I think certain people would say this is a good learning lesson for us as a team, not a punishment session for you.
Yeah.
Right. Or not for you specifically, but for like the person that was involved. And I think that's where culturally companies are different, where some will reward, or not necessarily reward, but they'll use it as an opportunity to coach, develop, help their people be better. And other places will say, here's your box, pack it up, you got to go. Right. But which situation is better?
Well, I mean, I would say it's not only that person that left it open. Like, sure, we left the door open. There's a whole team of people that should have had monitoring in place to say, hey, you left the door open.
Yeah,
right? Exactly. And then on top of that, if you think about, I'll use the patching and vulnerability management side of the house. You have these critical exploitable vulnerabilities on your external attack surface, and the patching regimen is not fast enough. And there's reasons why we can't patch. There's conflict. We can't test it, all the things. So now you have this window open to the attackers for an extended period of time. If they take advantage of that, whose fault is that? I think that you really should look with retrospection on how quickly we can patch, because with AI now and the ability to reverse engineer patches and updates, the attackers are crafting exploits so quickly. And so you have to be able to patch faster. So whose fault is it? The person who fails to patch timely and leaves that door open, or is it, just, oops, we need to be better. I think there is a balance there, but you got to strike this, sense of urgency with your teams, that if you guys don't do your job quickly and well, that you could leave us all open for massive impacts, including loss of jobs, loss of revenue, loss of reputation. So it's just something I really harp on.
I want to rewind a little bit, because I noticed that you said you got this news, or you heard about this being talked about on LinkedIn. Is that where you normally get your cybersecurity news?
Outside of you guys?
Yeah. No, I definitely watch the LinkedIn's, and also the, I have a whole feed of like RSS feeds that I see in the morning to catch up on those. I don't know if that was for Fern, but for me, I have a whole feed that I look at first thing in the morning with my.
Well, it was for Fern, because Troy, you have a whole business on threat intelligence, so wasn't going to ask you about that.
No. This is why I'm the lay person around here, right? I'm just the average Joe, right? That's doing my best to understand the world around me. So you're right. A lot of it comes on LinkedIn, right? A lot of it comes. I follow a lot of security. We'll call them influencers. Whether or not their pedigree can, line up with that or their experience, I think it does in a lot of cases. Like Marcus Hutchins is one of the guys that I follow, and he talks about a bunch of different things that I'm like, oh, that's interesting. So for someone like him, of course. Now there's people out there that do a bunch of TikToks and put it on LinkedIn and say it's about security, not necessarily following that as often. I'll see it, but I don't necessarily think twice about it. So there's a lot of people that I follow in the security world. And then when they talk about these things, I kind of get some perspective. One of them, actually, you guys might actually know him, is Ira Winkler. Are you guys familiar with the name? So he's like probably my favorite guy on LinkedIn. And I'll tell you why. Because he doesn't hold back. He just says what he thinks and why he believes it to be so. And there's a lot of curse words in there. There's a lot of bleeps in his videos. But I know he's coming from a place of, experience and thoughtfulness on his answers, because he's been, like in the most recent one that I heard, he was the main principal architect for Walmart. So he's got a lot of experience in the retail world and securing Walmart, for example. But I really like listening to his stuff because there's really no BS. Where a lot of other people, it's very LinkedIn washed. So yeah, there's a few people on LinkedIn that I follow. Ira, he's not listening, but if he is, just know that your boyfriend, he's listening along.
So Fern, on that one, Ira has a group that he's put together called CruiseCon, which is the cybersecurity cruise where you can hear phenomenal speakers bringing like the world class, and Ira brings that together, some amazing speakers, and you should just follow him on LinkedIn, and you can go on a cruise and get some cybersecurity knowledge at the same time.
So we happen to have some friends that are presenting. So I was at a dinner, what's today? Monday? Last week. I was at a dinner last week on like Tuesday or Wednesday with a bunch of CISOs. And one of them is actually speaking at CruiseCon West in October. And so yes, CruiseCon, he has CruiseCon, this is now the second one. And then they're also doing another one, I think in Mexico, where it's not a cruise. So we're doing a lot of talking about CruiseCon, and I know Ira's not paying us for this, but if you're in cybersecurity, and it's so I don't need to be paid to say this, but I listened to one of his podcasts where he talks about the reason why he does it, and I really liked it because he points out that a lot of these events are pay to play. If you're not an executive at a Fortune 500 company or a Fortune 150, you may not get invited to the special events. If you don't know the right people, you're just what he called a PIP. You're not a VIP. You're a previously important person, right? And so what I liked about this story that he told was CruiseCon is made for everyone. Everyone pays one fee. You get in, you go to any of the conference talks that you want. There's no gates. There's no one telling you that your title isn't good enough to learn. So outside of everything that I've seen, the one thing that I really do like about CruiseCon, and again, this is not a paid ad. He's definitely not paying us. He's not paying me. But from what I saw, it's like, you know what? This is actually a really cool guy, because what he's doing is he's giving people access to information that otherwise would be hard to get or gated. And he's helping make the world a better place by securing it, by helping people learn without barriers. So I'm going to say cheers to that. Back to our regular news story. Coinbase. Unless you guys want to say something else about CruiseCon.
No, I'll check it out though.
Yeah, I think it's less than what you would pay for a cruise to be on a cruise about cybersecurity
with our friends,
with other friends. Are you going, by the way, Troy?
I plan on it.
Okay, maybe I'll plan. My wife wants to do a Disney cruise. I'm like, oh, that stuff's expensive. Now, like, could you imagine I show up with like tickets to CruiseCon? And I'm like, hey, babe.
No, you don't tell her it's CruiseCon. You say, we're going on a cruise.
We're going on a cruise. We're going on, I think it's called Premier by Premier or something like that. We're going on a cruise. It was a very competitively priced. What are you going to do? There's a security conference, by the way. So, yeah, that might put me in divorce court. But, yeah, check out CruiseCon. If you don't know Ira, it's IRA, last name Winkler. Check him out and give the guy your money, because he's doing some good things for the people in cyber. Back to Coinbase, though. So we talked about insider threat. We talked about maybe potentially the risk of not having the right guardrails and controls in place. We also talked about maybe the risk of people being overseas and how that can be exploited in terms of how much further the money goes in these other places versus the U.S. Definitely an interesting topic. So what else do we want to add to that?
I would say, so I was thinking about, okay, these people in customer service have access to people's records, but they shouldn't have access to all of them all at one time, right? So maybe there's a control there too, where they can't see more than one at a time.
Or, hear me out. Have you guys ever called your bank to make any sort of payment? They always have you put in the card information. It's always automated system. You put in the card information.
That's BS though, because you put it in and you can record the tones and then play it back.
Oh, you can?
Yeah.
Okay. So maybe
a false sense of security.
Is it? Okay. Well, I'm the lucky duck that believed it for a second. Okay. So it's not.
Do you ever play music on the keypad?
No.
I used to do that. You can do Mary Had a Little Lamb. There you go. Every key has a specific tone. So if you punch that in over the phone, somebody else is on the line. They can record that and play it back and get your number.
Are the keys really like a full note or a half key apart in the tone? Because you can't play Mary Had a Little Lamb with just whole notes. There are some half steps in there.
Yeah, well...
when you're a teenager, though, it's pretty cool to try. It doesn't sound exactly like it, but you could tell.
It does. It sounds pretty close.
When I was growing up, my babysitter had a rotary phone. So I don't know about these. I don't know about this cool stuff you guys are talking about. But maybe I kind of do. So, okay. Yeah, now I just feel dumb for thinking that typing in that information got me safe. Or I was safer. So an automated system is not the answer.
Sometimes they'll do it where the system will send you an SMS with a PIN, and they can only open your record if they have that PIN. But you as a customer would be the one that provided.
I've seen that. I had to get our router replaced from Cox, and I went in there, and the guy said, "I'm going to send you a text. Give me the number." And I said, "For what?" He's like, "I need access to your account." Oh, okay.
So maybe that is the control to open up a customer record, but they certainly should not see multiple records at the same time. You should only see them when you need to access the record.
Yeah. There's definitely going to be some changes on the information that customer service people get access to. Probably less the better, but still, I think the one important thing to take away is money talks. And people are always looking to make money in some form or another. Not in a negative way, but people have bills to pay, family to feed.
How about this?
What's that?
Replace that function with an AI bot. Why do you need a person?
I don't know. But is there not a way to?
Oh, I don't know. I don't. What are the reasons you would call customer service?
No idea.
Where's my money?
Yeah, I think we're getting closer to AI doing more of those tasks, but I think every business is different based on what people need access to. And I think the key message here is just to limit that as much as possible to a single record at a time. I like the PIN number as an example, because then you have to put in a specific PIN or a code that they get via SMS or through an authenticator app. That's really locking it down for the customer service folks not to see a bunch of records. So I'm sure there's going to be some innovation at Coinbase, but if you're listening to this and you're a CISO or a security leader, and you're thinking, man, how can I implement something like that in my environment? I think that's a smart thought to have right now.
Yeah. And even if it's, like you said, authenticator, for a lot of my banking stuff, I have to get a separate text that I then have to put in as a password add-on to the normal login. I have a few things that have an authenticator app. We had to get the 6 or 8 numbers off of you link the app to the authenticator, and then you can go in and get those numbers. I kind of feel like we're going to see a lot more of that going forward versus just password, right? Passwords only. But it does kind of take us to an interesting topic of, is AI going to take my job? Because if at this level of customer support, dialing in whatever generic question, self-service portal, right? there's a lot of contact centers that are not in the US, right? There's a lot of companies that offshore their contact centers, their phone support to other countries. Maybe it's the price, maybe it's follow the sun, right? 24-hour coverage, because there's nothing worse than trying to pay a bill at 9 o'clock at night and realizing that the automated system is down and that you are now late.
Well, there was an article that we found that said by 2030, 14% of people will have to think of readjusting their career because of AI. So it doesn't. I don't think it really says 14% are going to lose their jobs. It does say 14% will have to figure out how do they adjust for their career. So how does that apply to cybersecurity? I think that's
5 years from now. So this is really relevant for people that are in high school that want to get into cyber. That within 5 years they will be at 2030, potentially graduating, potentially looking for a job, potentially doing programming and finding that there's really no jobs for them, especially only the development role with all the vibe coding and the AI slop that's out there. There's a lot of people losing jobs. I think actually, I'd have to find an article, but the number one role being eliminated right now is programming, like application development, which is interesting to me.
When I was going to school, and the thought was computer science and software development would go away because that stuff was shifting over to India where it was cheaper. Mm-hmm. And I mean, we never saw it actually take out a lot of jobs. Yeah, there was a shift of jobs, but it added more capability, more capacity for programmers and developers. This one, I don't know if it's going to really take away jobs. It will take away the low end jobs where potentially AI could build smaller modules or easier code. But I think somebody's going to have to still be on top of that to evaluate it and put it together. So
and just moving. I think we talked about this, Damian, that the number one place I think cyber is going to see AI have an impact is in the SOC, right? Being able to stitch together very disparate pieces of information to tell a story about an incident or a breach. God forbid, don't use the B word, an incident, an event, an alert, stitching all that together from all of the different telemetry that we have from our firewalls and our cloud, from our endpoints and our data. I think that AI is going to have the biggest impact there. Now, is that going to reduce people? I think it's going to give us a richer story about what's happening, and we're going to need fewer people pushing the buttons, but we still need people running the security operations center to escalate things, to start an incident call, to start documenting the process. So I love to advise young folks to go into cybersecurity. I think it's one of the most AI-proof industries because we're always going to have to protect all of this digital environment that we're building, no matter what it is, all the wearables that we have, and technology is becoming a big part of our lives in every direction. We have to protect those things, but you have to be smart about it. So be thinking about what is, going to continue to need humans oversight, hands on keyboard, that decision tree that can't be done by a computer.
So you're saying anyone looking for a career in cyber shouldn't be worried about losing their job?
Well, so
a lot of the entry roles for security are in the SOC, right? Because it's really hard for people to want to hire an engineer with no experience. Like I can name a bunch of people that told me to my face, I want to hire a college graduate as an engineer because of the risk, because of the potential lack of experience. And a lot of times, fresh cyber graduates do not get into engineering roles.
So I would the one thing that I don't think some organizations and leaders are thinking about is how to build that pipeline of talent. And if you don't think about how to build that pipeline on your own, it's never going to exist, right? So I can't just go out there and say I'm going to hire somebody straight out of school and they're going to do all this work. There's development time in the person that has to occur. And so anyways, if you're a young person out there, one, find a company that's going to coach you along and mentor you to get you to that level that they want you to be at. And how do you get there? Number one, the first thing I look for is their personality and passion, right? If you come into this thinking it's a 9-to-5 job or I'm just going to do this
Clock in, clock
clock
out.
in, clock out. If 5 o'clock, I'm done. I don't start till 9. That's not how cybersecurity works. But if you start to feel like, you know what, I'm doing this, and at nighttime I'm doing some extra work because I want to better myself, and there's a blurry line between whether it's work or whether it's self-improvement or fun, then you know you're in the right spot, right? I mean, we jump on this podcast. This is in addition to our day jobs. We all have day jobs. Mm-hmm. There's days that we still film this podcast after Troy's been traveling or I've been traveling, and sometimes it's a 14, 16-hour day before we even get to do this for fun.
So you're saying you like hanging out with me that much? The juice is worth the squeeze.
Well, yeah. I mean, so if you're a young person, you want to get into cybersecurity and you're really passionate about it, don't be discouraged, right? AI is not going to take those jobs. I think what you guys are saying, yes, AI will take some of the SOC tasks. They're not going to take jobs. They're going to help
change. Yeah, I think it's going to change the landscape. It's not going to eliminate jobs, Fern, to your question. I don't think, I think every human today, no matter what industry you're in, should not be sitting on their laurels, because the world is going to be an entirely different place in 5 and 10 years, thanks to AI. So I would be very cognizant of what I'm studying, what I'm going into as a career, and making sure that I am embracing AI and positioning myself to be a leader in my chosen area of work, but also in leading change and AI, improvements in that sector, because we're just going to see this massive shift the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah. And I would even add too, if you live in Arizona, you happen to be around the Phoenix metro area, there is this gem that they call TSU, right? Ran by Mike Manrod out of Grand Canyon, where every semester, a free course from 5:30 to 7 every Wednesday at the GCU campus, free to anyone to attend. You go in there, he runs you through, I think it's like 8 or 9, maybe like 12 weeks of training and development on security, the MITRE attack framework, DevSecOps, a lot of different things. And you actually get to meet a lot of people either in the industry already or looking to get in or in some way adjacent, right? So go to the events, do your schooling. If you're in Arizona, maybe find TSU, Threat Intelligence Support Unit, and attend, because you meet a lot of really good people. I did it myself. I passed with a 91%. So it is, if you show up and you understand what's going on, you can get through it.
And if you're there and you meet the right people, or even leave a good impression, because I've had Mike send over resumes and say, hey, this student took the class, took the course, and they're a rock star.
Yeah. There's a lot of people that locally hire from this talent pool, right? And so he's working on a few things right now. And like to your point, Damian, he's building the talent pipeline, right? He's got visions to have,
well, that's the start of it, right? So even if you hire somebody from a recommendation like that, you still have to further develop them.
Well, yeah. But I think the biggest hurdle for a lot of people is getting the conversation or being in front of someone to have the conversation versus getting kicked out of an ATS system because the resume didn't meet the criteria, right? So yeah, AI is not coming for your job. AI will help you do your job better. And if you adopt it well enough, you can leverage it as a tool to be better resource for the organization you work for.
Yeah, and organizations shouldn't be scared of AI either. Last week, I did an AI roundtable dinner, and really there's only one person that said, hey, we were in the block all AI mode. Yeah, but that's starting to change. And on the opposite end, we did have somebody else say, well, our CEO is actually mandating that we use AI. So how did we do that securely? All right. So I encourage businesses to think about how they're going to use AI as well, not just the employees trying to not lose their jobs, but to leverage AI to help them become more efficient. Companies are the same way. And actually security folks don't just say no, right, Troy? Don't be the department of no.
Don't be the fun blocker.
Yes, but we're going to put these guardrails and mitigations around it for sure. And definitely want to. If you're in Vegas, and most metro areas have an ISSA chapter, I want to give a shout out to the local ISSA chapter here in Vegas, who does an amazing educational outreach, CISSP boot camps, and all kind of stuff to get you, no matter where you are in your journey into the industry. So. Just about every metro area has an ISSA chapter. ISC Squared is also out there. There's just so many good groups. That's what, Fern, I think you were talking about. Get around folks in the industry, start networking. I have an amazing hire from ISSA in Las Vegas at my last company, and she's a rock star. Turned out, people were saying, Damian, just like you said, she's very motivated. She was, really wanting to do well in this industry, and she knocked it out of the park, of course. So it's a great place to meet talent.
So get out there and meet the people, right? And if you happen to be in a Phoenix event, maybe the DTF squad will be in the building. Might be.
Yeah.
I got a lot of different things.
For sure.
East Valley Security Meetup.
The East Valley Meetup. They just changed it to, is the first Thursday?
It's the first Thursday of every month in, we're changing locations. We used to have it in Mesa, but that brewery shut down.
Yeah, I just heard from someone that it was going to be 100 Mile Brewery.
Yeah, it's moving to Scottsdale, I believe.
It's like the intersection of the 101, 202 area.
Okay. So right in between Scottsdale, Tempe, Mesa, so hopefully central.
Yeah, by the airport.
Yeah.
Okay. So East Valley Meetup is one. TSU is another. ISSA here in Phoenix.
Or Vegas.
Yeah.
Or any country. There's, I think, not even just the United States. I think every country has their own, local chapters of things. ISC Squared, I know. I've been to a chapter meeting in Singapore.
Okay. There's ISACA, right? So there's a lot of different places for people to get involved. Bottom line is, you just got to find them and go meet the people. When you meet the people, become friends with the people, and then see where it takes you, right? I think that's all that we had today. It was mostly the Coinbase. So we talked through that.
Oh, we got the FBI warning.
Oh, that's the encore presentation. But let's get into it. That was FBI warning that AI is now being used to impersonate people in government roles. But in the very near future, if not already, that's happening for executives, some sort of leadership role. The easiest one to spot is when they say, hey, are you free? I need you to go to Walmart and buy me a $500 gift card. That's a clear scam. But when it gets so good that you get a phone call from the number of the person, actually their phone number ringing on your phone in a lot of instances, it sounds like them. It looks like them potentially with video manipulation. It's a tough time to be a person with.
I think it depends on what they're asking you to do, right? So obviously if they're asking you to go buy gift cards, yeah, that should be a red flag. Yeah, that should be an easy one. Like, I don't know of any CEO or CFO ordering people to go buy gift cards.
No, so those are easy to spot. But if there is, so here's an interesting one. It kind of, maybe it's somewhat tied to BEC for business email compromise, where people will send in invoices through email that are not legitimate. Now you pair that socially engineered with the CEO calling someone in finance saying, hey, I just got this email. Can someone pay this bill? They say we're past due. Can you get it done soon? That becomes scary.
So I've actually had this happen. Actually, it's common where you get an email sent into accounts payable with a fake thread, history, where the CEO approved these payments, and then they send it over to finance with the fake thread response from the CEO saying that to just send it over to AP, have it paid. But yeah, if you pair that with a fake deepfake phone call or even video message from the CEO saying, yeah, I really need you to pay this now, could be quite convincing, right? Unless you go back, and those invoices, I think, would be really important. I know most organizations don't just pay invoices. There's got to be an approval process. There's a PO process. There's no PO. It's not approved, then it probably can't get paid in the system, right?
Yeah, this comes down to a process refinement, really having a solid process. And I think that, if you are a CEO or CFO today and you don't know about these kind of scams, then you must have your head in the sand, because this is happening so often and so fast and so furious. And you add in the deepfake. I've already seen in the wild Teams calls with a faked image and voice. I've seen WhatsApp messages faked with voice and chat. So it's definitely happening. It's not something that's hypothetical anymore. It's happening out there. So you have to have an ironclad process, and if you break the process, you need to be sure that you're talking to the person you think you are. And that happened. This is, we're talking about business here, but same thing with your families. Here in my family, we have code words, right? Because with all this deepfake, we've seen where attackers are calling parents and saying, "I have your child," or and then putting somebody on the phone sounds like your daughter or your son. So you've got to have a process, even for your own family, that's ironclad and something that you can remember to do, because this is going to only get worse.
Yeah, if you're thinking a Nigerian prince wrote you a check to cash and sent some of it back, you're living in the 2000s, or you're living in the late 1900s.
But I mean, I think that scam probably still works. If you send out 1 million, you're bound to get one person.
Yeah, all you need is one, right? Just one person to fall for, and you're good. So I don't know. I've never gotten anything like that where, hey, this is due, right? Pay this, do that. So I don't have as much exposure to it, but I would be curious on maybe some other comparable situations, right? So fake invoices, business email compromise, insider threat. What are some of the things that people should be looking out for when it comes to avoiding being scammed? Not necessarily to say that someone is altering or providing video or audio proof of something to do. Maybe that's part of it. But where else have you guys seen some things recently that you thought, man, that's actually really good stuff? Like, not good like I would buy it, but good like as in that's kind of scary, because someone not in my position or with my experience would have fallen for that. Any recent stories or stories you can think of?
Nothing recent. I mean, we talked about this in a previous episode where there's fake candidates, right? And then these workers from North Korea, they're kind of getting in somehow. Mm-hmm. But I think now that more people are aware of it, and there's ways that you can try to figure out if this person's real or not, it's just a lot of it's awareness.
Yeah.
Right. The problem, though, is not everybody is paying attention to the news items, this FBI report warning people of deepfakes, or even podcasts like these where we talk about them. Right. So who's the main target? If it's on a personal level, it's probably grandma sitting at home. Right. Who does grandma know the safe word or the code word for the grandkids? Maybe that's something we got to expand that out. Or maybe it's not direct grandma, grandpa, but it's an aunt or uncle. So there's different things you could attack vectors that could happen here. It's all about awareness, though.
Yeah. And you know what the easiest way is to be aware of all these things? Follow the DTF podcast. Because every week, every Monday, we drop an episode talking about current events in the news, like this week, Coinbase. All the if, bans, buts about Coinbase. We talked about other scams, getting into the security world, right? We talked about potentially AI being used to scam people out of their money, right? Business email compromise. All on one show. You can't get that anywhere else, at least not that I'm aware of. At least not by three cool people named Damian for the D, T, Troy for the T, and then Fern for the F. So I think with that, we're good for this week.
Yeah.
So we'll be back next Monday with the next episode. Hopefully some good things happen in the news.
Well, I don't know.
Are they really good if they happen? And
That's what I mean. Do we know another security incident's probably not good.
But if you don't have an RSS feed like Troy, and you're not on LinkedIn like me, and I don't know what Damian does, You've probably tapped in somewhere. But if you don't have those resources available to you, and you want to get something you can listen to on your way to work, watch on your lunch break, or even just throw in some AirPods and walk around the office listening to people talk about these things, there's only one place to go. Which reminds me, as we close out, if we can get to 500 subscribers by the end of the month, May 31st, a custom tailor is flying in to measure someone. If they're in Arizona, by the way, if they're in Arizona, we'll do it in person. Custom blazer that they will have within a couple months, completely free, simply by subscribing to the YouTube. Right now, I think we're close to about 100 subscribers. So we got a way to go.
Yeah, 400 to go in 2 weeks.
Yeah, 400 to go in 2 weeks. I think we can get it done, but this is just your friendly reminder. Subscribe, and you can be the most well-dressed person at your next tech event. Any closing words?
No, this is good. Let's keep the ball rolling. Look forward to. We're only 4 episodes in.
4 episodes in, crushing the YouTube, crushing the views, just like I crushed the scale. Now I got to go to the gym. Have a good week, everyone. We'll be back next Monday.
See you guys next week.
All right. See ya.